Hey y'all, we are live. Look, I am so sorry for the delay. The devil is busy today. Busy. But thank you, Jared, for coming on. And look, y'all seeing us like this is like what our 50th episode. We came back later than we thought.
I know. So yeah, I know last episode I promised I'd have all the podcast stuff done, but I wasn't anticipating it being a week later. So people will just have to wait for episode 51 for that
Yeah,
one, unless we end up doing it in like 2 days. So
right. The topic was my idea because just after the exciting results, from the primary for the New York mayor, the Democratic primary, um, a lot of people was talking about it, and a lot of people are getting hopeful. So, yeah, I would love to talk about that, and I want to know, like, what do you think of the results? Like, was this an upset to you? Would it count as an upset?
do I think it's of it as an upset? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that um, Cuomo is an establishment candidate. He's been around for a very long time. Like, he has name recognition. We know that name recognition goes really, really far, or at least it used to. It may be the case now that name recognition could actually be to your detriment because it's so obvious that people want something different. Although we'll talk about this later. I think what that something different is, I think, is kind of confused. But so yeah, from that standpoint, it was kind of surprising. But by the same, or on the other hand, like, some of the polling I'd seen showed that it was a pretty close race. So like it could have gone either way. So I was like somewhat, I wouldn't say surprised. Like, I wasn't predicting it, but I also wasn't like shocked either. So
Hmm. Well, I voted for Zoran, and
mm,
I'm glad that he won. Um, can you explain how it works for the non-New Yorkers, like the prime?
yes. So yeah, New York has what's called a ranked choice voting system. So I think this is maybe the second election for mayor that they have had this. So before, it used to be, if you were registered as a Democrat, you voted in your primary, you voted for one person, and whoever got the most votes went on to the general election in the fall. And the same is true for the Republican side. But the Democratic Party implemented, I think the Republican Party did too. I'm not entirely sure, because they can create their own kind of rules for their primary elections. So they decided to like implement this ranked choice. So like, as opposed to just picking one person, you essentially have all of the candidates and you can rank them based on your preferences, essentially. So the idea behind it being like, well, maybe there's multiple candidates you might be okay with, and so like you'll just rank them, one, two, three, whatever. Or maybe there's a candidate that you don't like at all, so like you don't rank them at all. So it's just like a way to kind of stratify your preferences. And so after you rank it, what they do is they have like this weighting system. So like, not ballots that ranked a candidate one. If you're ranked number one, you get a certain number of points. If you're ranked number two, you get a certain number of points. And they just take like the average of all of the like total ranked ballots.
Mhm.
So it's a little bit more like, it takes a little bit more kind of, and predicting the outcome, I should say, is a little bit more tricky because you don't really know how people are going to rank their ballots. And so like it could actually, interestingly enough, who does a ranked choice ballot? The Oscars. So like you don't just vote for one best picture, you get to rank all 10 of the movies nominated and you can slot it however you want. And so like often what ends up happening is that it's not necessarily the movie that gets the most number one votes that wins. It's the movie that kind of is somewhere in that middle ground, like probably ranked like two, three, four, like the movie everyone likes, but no one hates, as opposed to like the movie, everyone loves, but lots of other people also hate, like that might cancel each other out. So it just gets kind of tricky.
Oh, the more you know. I didn't know that about the Oscars.
Yeah.
So yeah, Zoran Mandani. I have not really heard of him like prior. Have you ever heard of him? In this,
I hadn't heard of him until he started running. I believe he's in the state assembly. So like, or is it I'm pretty sure it's the state assembly. Might be the New York Assembly, but I think it's somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure it's in the state assembly. And so like he's not like a national figure. He's a statewide kind of a, you know, more known in like Queens, which is where he represents, in like in Albany. But yeah, I didn't really know much about him up until maybe a few months ago, whenever it seemed like he was more than just like a fringe candidate.
Yeah, he seems to be the most liberal person on the ticket. And yeah, so would you have voted for him if you lived here?
Probably. I mean, I didn't look at all of the candidates who are running. And so like I would also need to look at all of that. But like, this is gonna sound terrible, but like I also know that the mayor of New York does not really have nearly as much power as people believe that they do. Not because they just aren't trying hard enough, but because in the 1970s, there were a series of reforms that New York underwent politically that like essentially revoked a lot of the power from the mayor and kind of undermined the democratic machine. Rather, it moved most of the power of governance of the city to the state. So like a lot of, for example, the subway, people always would, when I lived there, people would always be like blaming Bill de Blasio, who was the mayor at the time, when the subways would like shut down. And then, you know, because they were predicting to get like, you know, 25 inches of snow. And then come to find out we only got like 2 or 3 inches. And people were like pissed. And he'd be like, I didn't even know that they were doing this until I saw in the news with everybody else. Like the mayor has no power over the subway whatsoever. It's all controlled by essentially the governor. I mean, you could say MTA, but MTA is all pretty much at the behest of the governor. So like the governor controls that. The power to like tax and spend, that's all more or less at the state level. Like you have to get a lot of approval for stuff like that. And so really all the mayor is over in New York is like making sure that the trash is cleaned up somewhat. The school system, so the public school system. So he does appoint the commissioner of education for the school system. So that's not nothing. And I would say the police, but only in title, because the police union is so powerful. And so like, with the exception of Michael Bloomberg, because he was so fucking rich, like they pretty much just like steamroll the mayor. So all that to say is the mayor does not, and New York has some of the most cutthroat democratic politics. New York and California have some of the most cutthroat, and Illinois. Those 3 states have some of the most cutthroat democratic politics. And so there's a lot of like quid pro quo, a lot of, you know, machine politicking, stuff that, you know, goes on behind the scenes. And so I don't really think it matters that much who the mayor is, like, to be completely honest. Because I hate to say that because I don't want people to interpret that as me saying like they shouldn't vote. I'm not saying
they are.
I know, but this is why I have to like be explicit because people often misconstrue what I'm saying. And so like, let me say for the listener, I am not saying you shouldn't have voted. I'm not saying you shouldn't participate. I'm not saying any of that. All I'm saying is you can go read all about how in the 1970s, there were a series of reforms implemented to essentially defang the mayor. So I'm just saying, like, don't get it twisted.
I heard Bloomberg actually was backing Cuomo.
Yeah, I mean, well, Bloomberg is, you know, first off, he's opportunistic. So like he's gonna do it back whatever candidate he feels is gonna be you know, represent his interests, which as, you know, a multi-billionaire is to, you know, make sure that things as he understands things stay the same, more or less, the status quo, essentially. So that didn't really surprise me. Yeah.
Oh, and then I want to talk about, what about housing and the rent? Because it's too damn high still. Like,
well, the rent is tricky because so there are some things the mayor could do, but like not at scale and not at the scale that I think people want to happen. So like so it's also important to understand like why is the rent so high in New York? Like I feel like we just don't ever talk about that. We always be like, oh, you know, supply and demand, there's not enough housing. I'm like, well, they've been building all these mega 150-story skyscrapers all along Central Park for the last 2 decades. So that nobody lives in. So like, what's really going on here? So like, we're building all these apartments that nobody lives in, but there's not enough housing. So like, what is really the truth? And so I feel like the whole like supply and demand, we just need to build, baby, build, like that misses the point. Like New York used to be one of the most affordable cities in the world not that long ago. Like within, like not in our lifetimes, but not far before that. And so like the historical question is like, how did New York go from being like a truly working class city to pretty much one of the most unaffordable cities in the world? And so I think to understand that, you need to understand the nature of the New York economy, which the New York economy is a real estate economy. And so the city depends very heavily on property values rising at rates that really price people out, because that really is, we kind of talked about this in other episodes, like cities depend very heavily on property tax revenue. So the contradiction is, they create policies to like rise property values, which if you are a homeowner, you benefit from this too, to a certain extent, although insurance prices have gone up too. So like that might lessen how much you benefit. But like, so they have an imperative to like make sure that these property values keep rising, because if they don't, like the city is going to be kind of short on revenue. And like these taxes pay for schools, they pay for all sorts of like infrastructure improvements. And in fact, they don't actually generate enough revenue to cover most things, like even basic things like sewage. Like New York has to go into tons and tons of debt. Well, let me rephrase that. New York goes into tons and tons of debt, not because it has to, but because the way that we've erected our financial system is such that cities depend on bonds, issuing bonds, which is just a form of debt, to pay for things that they need to pay for. But, the only other way you get the money would be to like raise taxes. Well, wealthy people aren't going to let you raise taxes on them. And like poor people can't afford for their taxes to really be raised much. So the only other option that cities often have is to go deeper and deeper into debt. But as I've said before, when you go deeper and deeper into debt, like you also, all cities have credit ratings. And so like, if New York starts adopting policies where it might seem like they can't service their debt, they can't actually like make these payments, then Moody's, which is like one of the big like credit agencies, would lower New York's credit rating down and saying, okay, well, stop lending money to New York, because like they're gonna do things like, instead of like paying you back, they're gonna do stuff like, put money into schools or whatever. Like they don't really care where the money is going. Like they just want to make sure, they being the bondholders, just want to make sure that they're getting a return in their investment. And so like you have all these contradictions that I don't really see how the mayor can really deal with this, because it's bigger than just New York. Like it's a problem, as I've said before, with the way that we've structured our broader kind of political economy. And so like, if we're not putting that on the table, all that people can hope for is to try to, I always say that people want capitalism, but like good capitalism. Like they want the good capitalism where we had like cheap consumer goods in the 90s and like cheap rent. Like that's the capitalism they want, without the bad side of it. And I'm just like, it's a package deal. Like you can't have one without the other. Like there's always going to be some of the bad stuff. It's just a question of like, who's going to have to bear the brunt? And my answer is like, well, we don't need to make this choice. We could also just like rationally say, well, is there a way that we could actually address some of these issues in a much more like systematic fashion that puts human need over return on investment? And that's an open question. Like I don't know if that's possible, but like that to me seems like the question we should be asking.
Human need versus return on investment.
Yeah, because right now, almost every major, if you are a private institution, like you more or less, the primary thing you're most concerned about is like making sure you get a return on your investment. That's not to say that you can't be concerned about other things, like sure, but like the bottom line, which is why they call it the bottom line. The bottom line is, are you getting a good return? Are you like making more than you made the day prior? Like that's kind of, or this quarter versus last quarter. So, I mean, it's a very basic, like if you open a business, like before you could even be concerned about anything else, you need to make sure that you are actually, not, turning a profit. So like you can stay open. And then once that's satisfied, then you can do the other questions perhaps. But like that has to be your primary motivation, not just because you're greedy, but because like that's the nature of like capital. And so my thing is like, can we put that on the table? Can we ask that question? Is it possible? Can we put human need over what somebody getting a return on investment?
I doubt it, but we shall see.
Well, my whole thing is, why doesn't anybody even broach the question like that? If I were a politician, which I would never be, like my pitch would be like, all we need to be concerned about is, can we like ask that question? Like housing. Okay, housing is produced not first and foremost for people to live in, but first to make sure you get a good return on that housing and like the real estate events. That's the first order item or first order concern. And then we know this to be true because like we build housing that nobody lives in, so that lets you know that whether or not people live in it is this maybe a secondary or a tertiary question. And my question is like, can that be the first question? Are we building this so people can live in it, not so people can get a return on it? And maybe the question is no. If the question is no, then to me, like there really is no point in doing politics anymore, because that's where we are historically. That's the question. The question in the 18th and the 19th century was, can we produce enough for everybody? Which that was the question that capitalism answered, which we've gotten to the point to where yes, we actually do produce enough for everybody, but like we don't distribute it to everybody who needs it because we can't ask that question. So like until we can ask that question, to me everything else is kind of like beside the point.
Okay, but let's get back to the results of that election.
Right, more than a tangent.
But what did you find interesting from the results?
So one of the most fascinating results, and I feel like people are not going to touch this, and I'm like, it really annoys me because people never want to talk about the complicated questions. They just reach for the low-hanging fruit. And I'm like, no, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this glaring situation because this is where I find it fascinating. What I find fascinating is that Cuomo actually did pretty well with like predominantly Black neighborhoods all over the city. Most predominantly Black neighborhoods in all of the boroughs went for Cuomo. Zoran did better with like white millennials, pretty much, well, younger people. So like younger people of all ages, but also like, you know, white yuppie types, the gentrifiers, as people like to call them. Like he did really well in those areas. But if you look at, you know, again, Black people, or even like there was one graphic I saw, it was like based on income. So like if you made less than $50,000 a year, you voted for Cuomo, or more people who made under $50,000 a year voted for Cuomo. Whereas if you made over like $150,000 a year, you voted for Zoran Mandami. And I'm just like, oh, this is an interesting kind of situation. And of course, people were looking at this and being like, oh, it's just because poor people are confused, or they, you know, they've been brainwashed. They've been all like, people can never have agency. People can just never vote for somebody because they actually believe or support the things that they espouse. It always has to be like, oh, well, the poor people just didn't know what was best for them. And so like, if you would have done a better job with the messaging, we could have changed it. And I'm not convinced about that. And so like, I want to talk about that because I think it actually underscores something very fascinating, which is what I've been saying for a while now, which is that I think most Americans are, and this is going to be super controversial because we're confused, but I think most Americans are Republicans. I do. Not like GOP elephant, George W. Bush Republicans. That's not what I mean. Like, wipe that image out of your mind. I mean Republican as in 19th century Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln. A free man is a man that can be a free laborer, essentially a man who can work as much as he needs to until he can save enough for himself and his family and mind his business. And it's not necessarily, and, you know, works hard. He is passionate about what he does. He, you know, just wants to be left alone, like doesn't want, you know, all of, you know, just to be free. That was kind of the Republican ideal of freedom. Now we can, you know, lament that, or we can be like, oh, well, like what kind of like nonsense is this? But like I do think it is a spirit in American society that is very dominant. Like, and I don't think that people take that seriously. Like most people just want to have a job that they can provide for themselves and not struggle and be left alone. Like that is a very Republican ethos. And so I think for working people, like people who make under $50,000 in this case, I think for them that's kind of like get out of my way. Like that's essentially and that's pretty much been the MO of the Democratic Party for the last 50 years. Get out the way. And so I just think we need to reckon with that, because what is it about this kind of democratic socialist platform, which we can talk about? What is it about this platform that people find appealing, particularly like younger people, that they find appealing? And what is it about this platform that isn't, people can say they're cynical, whatever, but for whatever reason, it's not landing with people the same way. And so I'm just curious about this.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to highlight what Ray is saying in the chat. He did well with Black millennials and younger. I'm guessing something about Zoran. It's the boomers who were into the name recognition of Cuomo. And he says he also didn't focus his campaign in Black neighborhoods. He focused on immigrants who were not Black, who voted for Trump in Bronx and Queens. He flipped them and went from there.
Okay. I mean, I guess my question still is but this isn't just a one-off thing. Like, it is true that I think of him, there is a kind of a subset of the Democratic Party, this kind of democratic socialist subset of the party that I do think has a particular appeal to certain demographics. Now that's not to say that it is limited in appealing to other people, but there's obviously something that is not resonating with people in the same way across the board. And so I'm just curious as to what could explain what's going on here. Again, I still believe that most Americans are Republican. They just want good capital. They want good. That's also a very Republican idea. It's just like this good capitalism idea. Like just control, get rid of the bad stuff, and we just want the good. I'm just but you can't. You have to have both. Like you can't have one without the other. And I think that's the point that I want to talk about with this democratic socialism thing, because to me, democratic socialism, in reading these platforms, it's like the good capitalism, like the capitalism.
Sorry, but yeah, I want to get to that. So I was thinking democratic socialist. This is the closest thing we can get to without it actually being socialism, I guess. But, I'm thinking socialism is a good thing. So I'm would you be for democratic socialism?
So it's less about good and bad. It's just more so about what is it accomplishing exactly, or what are the means too. That's also really important. I would love for rents not to be so damn high. I would love for people not to have to spend 60% of their income on housing. I would love for people to be able to feel comfortable going to the doctor or going to get medical care if something is wrong with them without worrying about. I would love for people not to have to, this is a true story. I actually know this happened to somebody who actually fell and potentially broke their leg and was too afraid to call an ambulance because they didn't know whether or not it was in network or not, and didn't want to spend $30,000 going to the ER. So yes, I would love for these things not to be the case. But the question I think has to be raised is why is it the case? And I just think the democratic socialist framework, this whole fight the system, take the oligarchs down, the billionaires are being too greedy and their greed is sucking. I just don't think that's the right framework for understanding what's going on. And not only that, but I think it's oversimplified in a way that I don't think is helpful, because this is what happens. And I saw it firsthand when I lived in New York with Bill de Blasio. Bill de Blasio ran a very similar kind of campaign as, I don't know if you remember, but it was still very similar. Tell the two cities, the billionaires have gotten too rich, it's jacking the cost and the small people, whatever. And that didn't really go anywhere. And then it didn't go anywhere. And what that happens, it left people disillusioned because people were like, oh, well, like he made all these promises that he didn't keep. And then also embolden his critics because his critics be like, well, we told y'all none of this is going to work. And so like, I just don't want to end up in the same place again. And so like, I'm just like, rather than rehashing these same frameworks or reusing these same frameworks, is it possible, open question, is it possible for us to like say, you know what? All this language that we had from the 20th century, left, right, liberal, conservative, all of that, like socialism, can we just like forget all of that? Like none of it is relevant. And can we ask ourselves, can we actually make a society in which the first question of any productive, enterprise is, or productive situation is whether or not we can do this for human good or human need and not so some people can get a return in their investment. To me, that's the question that needs to be taken up. And I don't see democratic socialism reckoning with that. And I think what it does is like, it does a few things. One, we will never, again, because I think most Americans are Republicans, we're never going to get beyond the like Protestant kind of work hard, nobody wants government assistance. It's just like, I don't know about you. When I was in elementary school, they used to like legitimately like tease kids who were like on welfare or it was like it was brutal. And I went to elementary school. We did not have any white kids at our school. It was literally one white person the whole 5 years I was there, and they called him Eminem. We didn't know, it was all black people. And this was like among all of the kids, just like finding out that so-and-so lived in, the projects. Oh, so like there is a certain aspect about American, there is a spirit about America in the sense that people just want to be able to like get a quote unquote good job and like do for themselves. And so like my whole thing is like, well, like, okay, well, part of the way we can do that is like by actually like creating conditions that allow that for people. And I think that really is the spirit of socialism that I'm all about. Socialism to me is like being able to ask the question of, can we do this for human needs so that everybody's needs can be met and that people can then free up their time to do whatever makes them, whatever they're passionate about, whatever they want to do. Like, there isn't a reason for most of us to be working, all these hours. Like there's no reason for it. As I've said before, most of my work is historical work. And so like, I'm always reading things from like, especially the 19th and early to mid 20th century. And everybody, literally, it didn't matter if you were everybody was like, we're getting to the point where people really don't need to work anymore. So like what we need to be concerned about is like, how can we like make sure that people can like keep themselves busy, essentially was the question. That's what the Jetsons is about. And so like, that's the type of socialism I want to like, that's the conversation I want to broach. It's just like, okay, can we like take Amazon and instead of like having Amazon exist just so that Jeff Bezos gets rich, can we like create Amazon to like, and use the apparatus that already exists to like distribute things to everybody? Like, is that can we even have that? Maybe we can't, but we don't even allow ourselves to have the conversation. It's just like not even allowed to be discussed. And that's where I think we need to be. And I don't think democratic socialism is just like, let's just make capitalism work better. And I'm just like, you're not going to make it work better. It's done the best it can do. It's out of gas. So let's try something else.
Right. So that's where the title came from, y'all. Like, is democratic socialism just progressive capitalism? And when you brought that to my attention, it was just really like, it was just really eye-opening. I'm just like, you know what? I totally get what you're saying. Okay. So yeah, I wanted you to like, just, let the people know like what you meant by that.
Yeah, so progressive capitalism, I didn't make up this term. Like, this is a term that's been, there's a book he's an economist named Joseph Stiglitz. So he was kind of an advisor during the Clinton administration, but he's kind of been one of the liberal kind of proponents of progressive capitalism, democratic socialism. Essentially, like, let's just make the market, let's just fix the market imperfections. Let's just fix things. Like, just, capitalism it has a bad side. So let's just like make sure we don't let the bad side of it happen. I'm just like, yeah, but the bad side is also, it's a side. In other words, like it's a part of how the whole structure organization of the economy functions. It's not you can't just pick up one without the other. It's like, it would be like you meet somebody and you fall for them, like you really like them, but there's certain things they do, like they don't close cabinets, or like maybe don't flush, or so no, I'm just, oh, can we just like get them to stop it? I'm just like, yeah, you got to take the good with the bad. It's just like, and that's kind of, and we tried this, is we've tried progressive capitalism. That's what the New Deal was about in the 30s and 40s. And so Franklin Roosevelt was like, capitalism really fucked up. Like it really, the Great Depression was pretty terrible. So like, is there a way we can like try to like have both and like, let's have the good stuff from capitalism, but like let's try to like control the bad stuff. And it worked maybe for about 30 years, but like it worked at the expense of what? It worked at the expense of pretty much Black people were excluded from 75% of its provisions. So it required like lots of people to not even have access to it. It worked at the exclusion of women, especially Black women. It worked by all these wars in the to essentially find cheap exploitable labor elsewhere. It worked by all of these mechanisms, these unintended consequences. That's how we made it work. And I think the thing is, the bad stuff has always been there. But for the up until about 20 or 30 years ago, and I kind of had a thread about this on Twitter. Nobody really talked about it because I don't think people knew what to do with it. But I was just saying, like, the last 50 years of American capitalism has been about trying to stave off the bad stuff from the middle class. And so in the 90s, when Bill Clinton had ended welfare as we know it, that was like pretty much opening the door for the bad stuff to take over, the lower working class. In the 80s, when there was the crack epidemic, that was capitalism taking the poor and who were disproportionately Black. In the early 2000s, when we had the war in Iraq, that was another way for capitalism to essentially, the bad stuff to take care of the lower to lower mid middle class. And so now it's getting to the point to where the professional classes, the people who thought that, they had the types of jobs that would insulate them from capitalism's bad stuff, the people who work for government, in academia, in, these white collar job corporate spaces, like now the bad stuff is coming for you too. And I think people are reacting against it, understandably so, because when you feel like you're being disadvantaged, you are going to do what the economist Carl Polanyi called engage in enlightened reaction. So like you sense something's going on, you're reacting against it. And my whole thing is like, is it possible for us to be less reactive and try to be more proactive? And again, the way we start being proactive is by asking that simple question, which is, can we organize our society for the human need and not for people to make returns on their investment?
Yeah, the way you're just like describing it is like something eating away like from the bottom class and just eating its way higher and higher.
Yeah, so to that point, that's a really good metaphor. There's a book called Killing the Host. And he essentially makes that similar metaphor. It's just like, if you think of capitalism as a parasite and, the society being the host, that's essentially where it is. Because now capitalism has gotten so globalized that we're not really producing much wealth globally anymore. So like everything is just about like moving wealth around, really from the bottom to the top, but like just moving it around because we don't really need to produce as much as we need to anymore. Like if we just like actually rationally organize this, I mean, it's easier said than done. There's no like magic wand, but like, again, we need to at least try to broach the conversation. But like, if I were to like in a Democratic or even a Republican debate, and I asked the question of either major candidate is like, oh, can we possibly have policies that put the human need before return on investment, they would probably give me some bullshit like canned boilerplate answer, because no elected official wants to raise this question. Nobody. The only person who kind of does is Bernie Sanders. But again, I have issues with the way that he frames things. He frames it in terms of like good guy, bad guy, good capitalism, bad. It was just like, that's not like the diagnosis is kind of there, but like the solution is not. So like, can we have the recognition, but with a different set of like follow-up questions?
I know you really hate when there's like a good and evil applied to politics. I know that's like one of your pet peeves.
Yeah, it's just not helpful. Like it's just the world is too complex. First off, most of these systems are automated now, so it's not like people are like doing anything. It's just like what's going on is people are it's all algorithmic now. So like it's not like there's a dark like cloak, people behind the pulling all the strings. It's like no, like it's just I just find the good and evil thing to be very banal. I was going to say something else, but I'll be less charitable. I just don't think it's helpful in thinking of things that way.
Thank you for your comment, Agnes. I really appreciate it. A listening to understand and not respond perspective. Very informative, and she appreciates it.
Thank you. I mean, I think it helps that we're friends in real life. So
yeah, like we really be texting each other this shit, and I'll be learning. So, what else? Like, did we cover?
So I saw race. I thought Ray's point here is interesting. So he says that his voting framework is harm reduction. I actually think that's probably the framework for most people. And so like I think that for harm reduction for a lot of people, I think it means getting anybody who's done anything with like a bureaucracy, whether it's government bureaucracy or corporate bureaucracy, knows how awful it is. And so most people are just like, get the fuck out, like just get away. So I think people have a different understanding of like what harm reduction means. I think for some people, especially the democratic socialist folks, I think they really mean like welfare state. They think welfare state capitalism. They think, the New Deal. They think, free stuff, which I don't think that's how most Americans think about it. And I think unless we're willing to like admit that most Americans are Republicans in that way, I think that we'll keep spinning our wheels.
Yeah.
But a very astute observation.
Yeah, the statement, I think most Americans are Republicans, need just so many asterisks next to it. Like, you really have to break that down for people. Like, what you mean by like...
That's because people, again, everybody has these... That's why I'm like, I wish I could like flash the Men in Black like wand thing and like erase everybody's memory about politics, because everything is all distorted in terms of like what republicanism. So there's a really good book about republicanism. I would recommend. I read it in most of my classes. It's called Free Soil, Free Labor, Free Men. And it's all about like the mid 19th century Republican ideology, which again, I should remind people that most Black people were Republicans, both in the Republican Party and small R Republicanists in that way in the really up until like the mid 20th century. So there was something they found appealing about it too. And so I think it would be helpful for us to like actually revisit some of these ideas, because especially if we're talking about Black people, like a lot of our ancestors were on board with this. So like, what did they find appealing about these ideas? The ideas didn't change. They're still there. You might have to update them for the 21st century, but like they still speak to things that we can be familiar with. So I would highly recommend reading that book, or read like a lot of Frederick Douglass's old like speeches. We read a lot of his work in my Black political thought class, and my students are always like, "Oh, this is interesting. Like, I actually vibe with this." I'm like, "Yeah, you're a Republican." Like, I knew that. I don't tell them that. Like, they come to that arrival themselves, but like. Again, like it's not Republican in the like aggressively racist party of like the mid to late 20th century onward. Not that. Republicanism is an idea. It's a political ideology. That's what people need to read the book, Free Soil, Free Labor, Free Men. It's by historian Eric Foner.
I just had a flashback of watching Sister Act 2, and then when she corners Lauren on the block, and she's like, "Read the book."
Oh yeah. I haven't seen Sister Act 2 in eons, but I do.
I think I watch that like once, like I mean, at least twice a year. I'll watch it if it's on TV. Um, so the election going forward, I'm assuming that he is the Democratic nominee.
Mm-hmm.
So who will he be facing in the main area?
So he'll be facing the Republican nominee. I sent you his name. His name is escaping me right now. And then Eric Adams is running as an independent. So now Eric Adams is the wild card here. Excuse me, because of course he's going to play the race card. So he's going to be the I'm black people trust me. Like he's already said that he's taking the gloves off. So it's going to be very much like if you elect him, New York is going to go, fall even further into shit. Like the crime's going to be off the chains. Like he's going to defund the police. Like they're going to play all the tropes. So the question is like, is that going to work? I don't know. Eric Adams has his own issues in the sense that he has all of these like corruption scandals, but obviously like I think New Yorkers are kind of the view of like all politics are corrupt. So like we just kind of expect that from people. So I just never thought the like corruption angle and Cuomo was going to land. I'm like, it's New York. Like New York has some of the most corrupt politics in the world. Like what are we talking about?
I mean,
yeah, but this is why I'm saying this is the good or evil thing. It's just like the corruption comes not just from like bad people, but it comes from like inordinate amounts of wealth that people use for their own good. And that's dictated by capital. So like my whole thing is like, well, if you don't want people to accumulate all this wealth and like use that wealth to like get what they want, like maybe we should reorganize the way that people accumulate their wealth. But that's never able to be put on the table. So like we can't even talk about this. So like all we can do is like talk about good and bad. But to come back to Eric Adams, like it's interesting because he is the incumbent, so he'll have some incumbency advantage. He's black. I think that makes an interesting kind of dynamic for the reasons I said earlier. But the other thing, now what would be really fascinating is if Eric Adams could convince the Republican candidate to drop out. Because I think Eric Adams will get a lot of Republican votes. And if he could get a lot of independent votes with a lot of the Republican votes and some potential Democratic defections, I think he could actually get reelected. And so I think the math is tricky. So before, in most elections, whoever wins the Democratic primary wins the general election because New York is such a Democratic city. But because you have the situation where Eric Adams was a Democrat until he decided he was running for reelection and he's now an independent, but also like, the Democratic candidate is somebody that is somewhat polarized the mainstream Democratic Party. I do think there is an opening there that I think some politics might get a little interesting. And Eric Adams is going to have the police union behind him. He's going to have the real estate industry behind him. He's going to have lots of like corporate money behind him. So like, it's going to get nasty. So like, I think people should be prepared for that, but it'll be interesting to see how it turns out.
Yes. Can Cuomo run as an independent?
He could, although in his concession speech, it seemed he was kind of equivocating. So at one point he was like adamant that he was going to still run as an independent, even if he lost, but now it seems to kind of be back. I think he did worse than he thought he was going to do. So like, I think he kind of is reading the writing on the wall.
Man, it's going to be a very interesting election.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, also turnout is a big thing. So I think the turnout for the Democratic primary, I think if I remember reading, it was
super low.
About on par with I mean, primary elections are never high to begin with, and then it was off cycle. If you can get 30% in these elections, that's like really good.
Wow, that's crazy. Because I think I saw that it was a little bit like high 900,000s when, New York, there's like maybe like 8 million of us in here. Well,
it's for the whole city. The city has about 8.5 million people, which is probably an undercount because the census is notoriously hard to get an accurate census. It's probably more than that, but give or take 8.5 million. The official number is 8.5 million, but yeah, I mean, but of that, like you have a lot of people who are not registered to vote at all. And then you have a lot of people who are both registered and don't participate. So like, of the actual like kind of pool of likely voters. I think that's the denominator you have to pull from. But regardless, like these elections don't usually have like, it's not like presidential elections, which even that you still have a third of the electorate that does not participate. So like, and this has been true for decades. So like, it's not even really since Reconstruction. It's really, or late 19th century. It's been, yeah.
Well, I'm glad people are, the people that are here, like I feel like you're just saying to manage your expectations of what's going to happen, because you never know.
Well, you manage expectations about the outcome.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Not once he's elected. Like once he gets elected, then again, we're going to have that conversation to manage your expectations. But I've just learned that just being an adult and being a voter. One last question from the chat, from Ray again. Thank you for your participation today. How do y'all navigate this economic system to make sure you win, given y'all have so much more information than the average person? For example, as a trader, I see the scam. The markets are rigged AF. It's basically just passing money back and forth between uber rich institutions. It's been an enlightening journey.
Yeah, that's all it is. That's why the finance firms are so wealthy. It was just like they essentially, so you have to think about, I know this is hard, but you have to think about your life as like a very, very wealthy person. Like the type of person who probably never comes in contact with anybody that has like less than like $10 million in net worth. Like that's the type of wealth we have to be thinking about. It's hard for us because we all work for a living, and like if we don't sell our labor for a wage, we starve. But that's not true for a section of the pot. So for those people, they're like, okay, like manage our money. That's why asset management has become such a big like industry, because you have all of this wealth that's being accumulated at the top, and they just have all of this money that they need to do something with. Like we all know, like if you get a lot of money, you can just let it sit there. Like you have to let your money make money. So like, but yeah, all they do is they move money around. Like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citi, that's what they do. They move money around, and all of it is like done digitally now. It's all done. There's a really good book about this called Keystroke Capitalism, and talks about how all of this is just really just, digital transactions. In that transaction, it's making people all this money without anything being done. Like it's not like they're producing anything. It's not like they're contributing anything that society needs. It's just all about like moving money around. That's why I get it. Like working people are all into this like crypto thing because they want, their piece of the pie too. And I'm just like, I just wish that people wouldn't be like, if you can't beat them, join them. I've talked about this before, but like everybody can't join them. It's just like, and you're not going to beat them. So it's just like, can we come up with something else? Is the Miss Juicy me? Can we come up with something else? That's how I feel. It's just like, I feel like as somebody who reads a lot of history, it's just like, it's really crazy how you'll read stuff from like the early 19th century and they're just like, we're still having the same debates then. It's just like, can we come up? Is it possible to just like take this another step?
Yeah.
And what happens is like people don't learn any of this stuff. And so like they hear democratic socialism and they're like, ooh, this is like new. We could do this. I'm just like, people debated this in the 30s. They debated like, this is not new. Like we have to stop what Kamala said. We didn't fall out of a coconut tree. We need to know the lineage. We need to know how we got to these points. Like none of this shit is new. And I just feel like we operate in a vacuum, both like conceptually and like theoretically. And I want to challenge us to like stop doing that.
Well, y'all, we have hit our time. I must say though, like your journey from actually being in like corporate America to now is just so fascinating.
Oh yeah, like that's always like one of my kind of icebreakers when I meet people. I'd be like, yeah, I used to work at a bank, and they're always like, wait, not the socialist,
right?
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I've been in the belly of the beast. Like I know this shit. Like it's and so yeah, it is a journey though.
Yeah. Well, y'all, I hope y'all enjoyed our 50th episode. Please stay tuned because I'm pretty sure there's going to be more political news. And look out for our podcast as well. Once Jared gets it together, I'm going to put it on him
It'll be up by the next episode. Granted, the next episode isn't like tomorrow or like 2 days from now.
Right. And look out for his book that's coming out soon. Can you at least say this year is coming out?
As in 2025, no. In a good year, I mean, if all goes according to plan, it'll be next year. Like this process is very slow. The copy editing takes a very long time. There's a lot of moving parts. So like, if I could have it at a bookstore near you by like the end of next year, that would be like ideal.
Okay, Cardi B. I know y'all.
Listen, art takes time. Yeah.
It does. Look,
You can't rush art. No, I'm joking. It's more so like it's just a lot of moving parts. A lot of people emailing back and forth. Like it's just academia is very slow, y'all.
well, thank you for joining us, Jared, on my channel, y'all. And with that, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Oh, make sure you follow Jared too, JC Tiger Fan. On Twitter, he be saying, some really good gems and good selfies as well. So
I feel like Elon Musk like completely changed the algorithm. So like anytime I'm right about anything dealing with like socialism or like political economy, it gets like no engagements.
Right.
So I'm just like, what's the point? Like I'm just kind of like tweeting into the ether.
And what about your selfie today?
No, selfie. I don't know, but like when I post a selfie, it's just like, oh, I'll get like 600 likes in like 5 hours, and then I'm
Right.
like posting this whole like manifesto about like how we could actually transition to socialism, and it could like benefit everybody, and like it gets like no likes. I'm just like, okay.
You might have to start combining the two. I think Kendrick Sampson does the same thing. Like he'll post like an obvious thirst trap and then put his whole political activist things in the same post.
Oh, okay. So maybe what I need to do is like maybe write about these things, but like do it underneath a selfie or something, or like go live or something and just be like shirtless, and like maybe people actually listen to what I have to say about why we should care about finance, because as Ray taught us, like all they're doing is pressing buttons and getting very rich by doing that.
Right. Well, let me highlight this right quick. Thank you, Hawk. You guys do a great job at simplifying this for me as a 22-year-old in a way I can understand and talk about to my friends.
Oh, thank you. That was very sweet. I'm gonna like screenshot this. Wait,
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that. I'm so bad with technology, y'all. Okay, I'm gonna figure out a way to screenshot this. Oh, there we go. Hold on. I just have to. Yeah, because that made my day. Thank you. Okay.
That's the best thing to hear, like as a teacher, I'm sure, because you break it down for me all the time.
Yeah, it is, because I'm always like, I try to be really. I know we need to wrap up, but like I try to be like every time I teach something, a teacher class, I always take notes after it, and just to be like, if I use this example, did it land? Like, did this story like make sense? Like, because you have to figure out ways to explain complex topics or complex ideas in a way that can reach everybody as well as you can anyway. So I'm always trying to figure out examples or like references that could like try to like make things land. It's kind of hard. It's hard. Sometimes I'm like, I don't really know how to like explain commodity fetishism and like but I try. So like, yeah, that definitely feels good to see that.
Yeah. Well, y'all, we appreciate this. Happy Thursday, and we will see y'all soon. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and we will be back. Bye.